Hi there. I'm Tanya, the calligrapher and illustrator from Bright Spot Papier and Art. Welcome to my shop. I thought that while I'm out of my booth, maybe I'd put together some interesting info and thoughts to tell you a little bit about my work and my business so you can learn more about what I do and what inspires my work. So I started my Etsy shop in the spring of 2016. It really evolved out of my own art therapy. I'd been taking art therapy classes in 2014 as part of treatment for depression and chronic pain, and it really sparked in me an interest to get back into my art supplies. Then in 2015, I challenged myself to be creative every day for a year. I learned crochet, I knitted things, I dabbled in collage, I pulled out my watercolors again, I got back to drawing, and I rekindled my love of quotes. And then I really started dabbling in hand lettering, and from there moved on to pointed pen calligraphy. And I can talk a little bit more about that as I go on here. Um, I was new to Instagram at the time, and I posted my creations there for accountability and to connect to other artists. I even created my own hashtag and posted a whole slew of very poorly lit and badly filtered photos. um, in terms of calligraphy, I first started out with a starter kit of calligraphy nibs and a calligraphy pen that my sister-in-law got me for Christmas. I then taught myself the basics, just going through a book by Molly Suber Thorpe that I got at Indigo. From there, I moved on to taking an online class, and then finally I took the leap and flew from PEI to Toronto to take two workshops with a calligrapher from the US that I'd been following on Instagram for a really long time, Laura Hooper. And now after 4 years, I've got I've got 4 years of practice under my belt. I just find it takes time to find your own rhythm and style with calligraphy, and I'm still always learning. When it comes to illustration and watercolor, aside from my high school art classes, I'm completely self-taught. So I may not come at it from a trained artist perspective, but I like what I'm doing and I'm learning all the time. So yeah. When it comes to my creative process, I'm really inspired by beautiful and thought-provoking words, also by color, by pattern, and flowers. Definitely lots of flowers. So when I create my pieces, sometimes I'll start with a quote that really moves me and go from there, illustrating a border that to me feels like it pairs really well with the quote. And then other times I'll just want to dive right in and play with color. And then I'll go in search of the perfect quote or mantra or lyrics after the fact to pair with that. And then sometimes I simply just want to work with the words on the page and have them speak for themselves. So I have a number of pieces that are strictly calligraphy or hand lettered. When it comes to the words that form the basis for my work, sometimes they're from my collection of quote notebooks or from a quote book that I own. Sometimes they're sent to me by friends or social media followers, and sometimes I'll hear them shared on a favorite, like arts related podcast. I've been collecting quotes since high school, which was a good long time ago now, so don't do the math. I'll show you. This is my first, first quote notebook that I wrote in. I don't know, let's see. You can see some of the quotes. A lot of them were humorous and high school love related quotes and silliness like that, but some of the humorous ones are good. And then my longtime favorite one by Robert Louis Stevenson is in there too, and that one's been in my brain memorized for eons. So yeah, so that's quite a treasure that I found. I unearthed it from a box in my studio just recently. I also have quote notebooks that I've been capturing quotes in since 2015. So that's the stack of those, and they're all flagged with some of my favorites. So I started those in 2015 when I was doing my full year of being creative. And yeah, so if I have one sent to me, I'll write it down. I feel as though someday maybe I'd be better off with a database, but there are apps for that too that share quotes. But these are a selection of my favorites. And I also have quote books from various sort of like used bookstores. This one, I'm not even sure when it's from. Printed in the UK. 3rd edition. What is it? 1979. So not some current ones there. There's some pretty old ones dating back to the 1500s and whatnot. So that's kind of an interesting reference. And then I also was gifted this one by one of my sisters-in-law. And this one's pretty special. It was awarded to my father when he was in grade 10 in 1962. So that's pretty darn cool if you ask me. Get the hang of this camera eventually. Yeah, so that one's pretty special. So that's sort of where the inspiration for some of my pieces come from. Like, I like to think of myself as a curator of beautiful words. So whether they come from books, from podcasts, from song lyrics, quote books, you name it. I sort of capture them from here and there, and depends on how I'm feeling on a certain day, what inspires a piece, but that's where I'm sort of drawing them from. In terms of where I make my items, I work out of a studio in my home, and this is the back of it. On the other side over there, I wish I could turn the camera around, but this is a desktop workstation, so it's a little cumbersome. But I have what used to be a countertop from Habitat for Humanity, so it's like an L-shaped countertop, and I've plastered the walls with things that I have created over the last 5 years. They're all over the wall. Maybe I'll share some pictures later, or on my Instagram you'll probably find some pictures of my studio. Yeah, so that's where all my materials are. All my paper and my quote books are easily accessed and whatnot. So that's just on the other side of the room here. So yeah, that's kind of where I do everything. I can sit and concentrate and listen to my favorite podcasts and really get lost in the process. My designs all start on paper, sometimes in my sketchbook, and sometimes I'll just dive right in and start on the watercolor paper or handmade paper or whatever the paper is that I've chosen for that particular piece. All of my prints that are in my shop are printed in my home studio using my art printer. They're all printed on 100% cotton paper, cotton fine art paper, which has a lovely, lovely texture to it. It's archival and it's meant to last, and the inks are also archival. The exception to that is my recipe for an East Coast life, which you can, whoops, nope, wrong shoulder, is right there. And it's 16 by 20, so it's too large to print on my home printer, so I have to print it with a production partner. And the remainder of my products are created by production partners, either here on the island, in Nova Scotia, or further afield within Canada. And in terms of materials, so my designs are generally created on watercolor paper, which is interesting because it can be way more challenging to write on watercolor paper in calligraphy, because the nib has sort of two little tines at the end, and watercolor paper has a tendency to be quite textured. But doing that allows me to then add watercolor borders and illustrations to my calligraphy. Sometimes I'll use handmade cotton paper from a lovely Etsy seller out of the US, or I'll use Bristol paper, which is really nice and smooth if the design is simply going to be made up of words. And I like to write out my quotes in a number of different ways. So if the spirit moves me, I'll write in calligraphy. And the calligraphy that I do, it's called pointed pen calligraphy. So it's not with a fountain pen, it's using calligraphy nibs and a calligraphy pen. And the calligraphy pen is actually the holder that the nib goes into. So maybe I'll show you. This is my favorite calligraphy pen, and as you can see there, this is the nib. So I don't know if I can get it up closer there. Yeah. So whoop, that's one of my favorite nibs because it's nice and fine. And so you get really nice upstrokes that are nice and thin, and if you push with a certain pressure, you get a nice downstroke. So that's my gift from my husband one Christmas, made by Ashley Bush, Ash Bush, if you look for her on Instagram. So that's my calligraphy pen, and then the nib, that one probably won't come out because it's probably been used so many times it's stuck. But anyways, I can show you. This is my selection of nibs that I've ordered from two places in the US, John Neal Bookseller and what's the other one? Paper and Ink Arts, I think. I haven't had a huge amount of success finding a wide range of nibs, at least on the island, because I'm just dealing with Michaels. But out of the US, those are the two shops. And then there's a shop, Wonder Pens in Toronto, has a selection of nibs that I've also ordered from. So you can sort of see there a selection of my nibs. Let me see here. Yeah, there's some of the names. Anyways, I'll show you one maybe up close. And they all have different makers and names, like, let's see here. So I don't know. I don't have a piece of white paper that I could put behind it. Let's see. Does that help? Yeah. So it's like pointy on one end. Of course, it's not going to focus, but let's see. Anyways, hopefully you get the idea. So I have all sorts of different ones. I even have interesting ones that are shaped like hands, and those are more fun to look at, hard to write with, don't really create nice calligraphy, but they're pretty interesting to look at. Then there's ones that are called Blue Pumpkin, which I really gravitated to in the beginning, but the downstrokes are super, super thick. So I've gravitated away from them, so I have a whole slew of them here. Let's see if I can show you again. That's sort of what it looks like. So they're all kind of really unique, and some are made in Japan, for example. I probably need a magnifying glass to read them these days. Browse and Company, Nico G, Leonard Principal. Anyway, so I have a whole slew of them that I've collected over time, and if you look after them and clean them, you can really get some good longevity out of them. It's actually been a while since I've ordered any nibs. So that's for pointed pen calligraphy. You have the pen or the pen holder, and then the nib. And then I just refill. This is ancient. And I just refill it whenever and clean it out and then refill it each time I empty it. And it's just black Sumi ink, S-U-M-I is what I use. Yeah. Anyway, I've had a great big jug of it from John Neal Bookseller for a number of years now. Then I also have a favorite go-to ink by Pilot that's blue, and it's kind of like almost like writing with watercolor. It's wonderful. I love it. So in addition to pointed pen calligraphy, sometimes I'll write with what's called a brush pen. So here's some of my tools, favorite go-to tools. So a brush pen, these are two by Kuretake, but they have a nib on them, and it's not a brush in terms of it having like bristles. It's more of like a plasticky but flexible tip. I don't think it's going to show very well there. Boop, boop, boop. Anyway, you can get them in different hardnesses, and I have some favorites and then some that are really much harder to write with. Certainly like the Tombow ones that you can get at Michael's, the tips on those are really, really fat. So they're not as good for getting the effect that I'm looking for. I like using brush pens that will give you kind of a similar look as to calligraphy. And then sometimes I like writing out my quotes using paintbrushes and watercolor. So it all depends on, you know, how long the quote is, maybe what subject it is. Maybe I feel like it would be much more powerful if it was written in watercolor, in color, as opposed to black ink with a illustrated border. So it all depends. But when it comes to adding color to my work, watercolor is my preferred medium. So I've got a palette that I did a bit of research and watched a few videos and whatnot and read some books. So I filled this palette that I got off of Amazon with my favorite colors that I generally use in my work. Definitely a lot of pinks for flowers and yellows and things for shadows and whatnot. And then I'll use a range of watercolor brushes from 0 to 2 to 4 to 6. That's about the extent of it. I don't usually actually go more than 0 or 2 for the most part, but it depends on the level of detail in the illustration. So yeah, that's my happy palette. Yeah. So you might be wondering what you can find in my shop. I have quite a selection now of original pieces in various sizes. So I just went through, and because of the pandemic, it kind of got cut a little short because time to sit in my studio and create with children at school evaporated. So I was doing the 100-day project, and it was my 3rd year doing it. And generally what I like to do is create pieces that I can then sell in my Etsy shop. And this is the 3rd year now that I've been doing it. And then $10 from the sale of all of the originals goes to the Canadian Mental Health Association, the division that's here on PEI. So the first year I donated $100. Last year I donated $550. So it was pretty rewarding to be able to do that. So I have original pieces in my shop that I created as part of my 100-day project this year. There's still a few left from last year. And then there's originals that I created sort of in and around the last year or so. So they range in size from 4x6, 5x7, 8x10, and I think the largest is 11x14. And they're on anything from watercolor paper to smooth Bristol paper to handmade cotton paper. I think that's the extent of it. So yeah, so there's original pieces in my shop. I have a range of prints in 3 different sizes. So they're ready for framing. They're not in like odd sizes. So those are 8x10, 11x14, and 16x20. I just have the one 16x20 here, which is my recipe for an East Coast life that I illustrated for CBC East Coast last year. In addition to prints and originals, I also have greeting cards in 2 different sizes. I don't really have your standard greeting cards, so I don't have a line of birthday cards and Mother's Day and Father's Day and whatnot. Really, my greeting cards are just an extension of my designs that went onto my prints. So they're motivational quotes, they're inspirational quotes, and they can kind of be general in terms of what you're gifting them for. So, I mean, there are some that are love related, friendship related, some are in French and whatnot. But yeah, so they're sorted in my shop. The 5x7 ones are sorted by subject. And then the smaller ones, which are like 4¼ by 5½ inches, so I call them my smaller cards. Those are in a section unto themselves in my Etsy shop. And I also have vinyl die cut stickers, which I found were really fun to make. So I used some of the designs that are on my prints and created stickers of them, and they've really been a hit. Like the gratitude ones, the ocean related ones, the lupin ones, they seem to be, anyways, they're kind of crowd favorites, which is kind of cool. And who didn't spend their childhood enjoying or maybe collecting stickers? So anyways, I did. So in addition to stickers, I also have magnets in 3 different designs. And then when I first started out, I also put my designs on mugs and super soft and flowy tank tops, which are actually printed right here on Prince Edward Island. I haven't added any new designs to those lately, but I had a great time when I first started putting my designs on everything under the sun, which was kind of rewarding and exciting to see as a new artist and a new Etsy shop owner that, I could do tote bags, I could do tank tops and so on. So those are still in my shop and available. So I guess to close out here, I'm not even sure how long I've been talking or whether you'll have a chance to watch all the way through the video, but I thought I would end with maybe some interesting facts about me, so that you could know sort of the artist behind the Etsy shop. So I guess I would say most people are pretty surprised when they find out that I spent 20 years in the Canadian Army as a signals officer. I moved around Canada every few years. I studied at the Royal Military College of Canada in Kingston for my undergrad, which was in electrical engineering. And later at Carleton University, I did my master's in modeling and simulation, of all things. So most people find it hard to believe that I was ever in the Army, considering the fact that now I'm an artist. But I like to think that being in the Army and also being an electrical engineer instilled in me my love of details. And I think that sort of is reflected, or it influences and comes out in my work. I was also a competitive swimmer from a very young age, and was still competing well into 2001. I was a member of the by that point, I was a member of the Canadian military swimming and life-saving team. So I had the distinct honor of getting to compete in the Military World Games once, which was very cool. We were in Sicily for that. I also traveled to Germany, Rome, and St. Petersburg. So some interesting times there. I certainly didn't think that my competitive swimming was going to take me that far. Yeah, what else? Let's see. I have a love of all things, or many things, sorry, not all things, but many things. I love quotes, certainly, because that is basically the basis for my business. I love lighthouses. They remind me of my childhood, for sure. The lighthouse at Cape Spear in Newfoundland is definitely a favorite, and the one in Woody Point, because those are all tied to amazing childhood memories of traveling to see family in Newfoundland. Flowers, water, color, knitting, crochet, painting. I could probably go on, but we'll leave it at that. I'm also a podcast lover. I listen to them generally when I'm drawing, when I'm painting, maybe not always when I'm writing, because then I might lose track of where I am in my work, but my favorites are CBCQ for sure, because they cover all sorts of arts and entertainment, news, and interview authors and interview artists and interview musicians. So it really runs the gamut. So I find that really informative and interesting. Design Matters with Debbie Millman is a super fun podcast, because she interviews some pretty amazing humans and some giants in the design world. So that's pretty darn cool. And the History Extra podcast by BBC History Magazine. I do love British history, so that's sort of where my family originates from, way back, way back. And my grandmother on my father's side was a British war bride, so there's some links there that it just encouraged an interest in British history. And I guess lastly, I'm trying to read more this year and scroll less. So far, I think I've read 36 books, I think, this year since January 1st, which, so I think that's kind of going well. I feel pretty good about that. I'm really a lover of a well-crafted mystery. I love detective thrillers and also historical fiction, so I've read a lot of that since Christmas. But I'll read just about anything, like if it grabs my attention and it's, well written. I have a very long want to read list. It's definitely going to take me years, and I have to say that my local library is definitely a godsend. And I think that's it. There you have it. That's a little about me, my background, my inspiration, and my Etsy shop. I really appreciate your stopping by, and if you watched all the way through, awesome. Thank you for being here. Be sure to follow me on Instagram. I'm at Bright Spot Papier, so that's Papier like in French, Papier, Bright Spot Papier, all one word. And whatever I post to Instagram, I share to Facebook, but I'm not as strong a Facebook user as I am an Instagram user. So that's where you can find me. You can certainly email me at brightspotpapier@gmail.com. And I think as part of this market, there should be a chat option and an email option and whatnot. So hopefully we can connect if you have questions, if you have comments. You can also message me through my Etsy shop. So certainly reach out if you have any questions or interests. I'd love to hear from you. Take care.